All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Noise, Signals, Stories, and Spicy Takes, the show where we dig into the stories of the people shaping the future of app-based computing with a special focus on mobile. I'm your host, Matt Klein, co-founder and CTO of BitDrift and the founder of Envoy Proxy. Each episode will talk with engineers, founders, and technical leaders who transform the way their companies build and understand what's happening inside their systems. We'll dig into the challenges, the breakthroughs, the lessons learned, and we'll wrap it all up with their hottest takes, so let's dive in. Today, I'm with Charity Majors, who needs no introduction, but is the co-founder and CTO of Honeycomb.io. She pioneered the concept of modern observability, drawing on her years of experience building and managing massive distributed systems at Parse, which was acquired by Facebook, and Linden Lab building Second Life. She's the co-author of Observability Engineering and Database Reliability Engineering, and she loves free speech, free software, and single malt scotch. Welcome, Charity.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we get into it, what is your favorite scotch?
Oh, boy. That's like asking someone to pick their favorite child or their favorite cat.
I know.
But I'm a big fan of the dirty, peaty ones. Your Lagavulins, your Lefroy's. I really enjoy. Ardbeg does a bottling every year that I go out of my way to acquire. Like they did the Peat Monster. They always give it some jazzy name that's very in contrast with the rather staid world of Scotch. So
yeah, it's funny. I am more of a Highland type person, but I do enjoy a peaty Scotch occasionally. So anyway. Where I like to start is, typically asking people around their background. And you, from my understanding, I mean, you've had a really interesting tech career, just in terms of how you got into tech. And obviously, you're super well known and famous within the industry at this point. But, and I'm sure most of our listeners already know you, but I would love to hear from you just a bit of your story. I mean, take us through how you got into tech in the first place. Again, I know you had a pretty interesting childhood, if you're willing to share. So, I think just giving people a taste of you and how you got to where you are today would be fantastic.
Yeah, totally. I try to explain to my parents sometimes. They're like, so you're well known? I'm like, Mom, I'm like nano famous. There are like 300 or 3,000 people in the world who think I'm amazing. Nobody else knows about me.
I call it nerd famous.
Nerd famous, that's good.
Nerd famous, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. I think you and I are about the same age probably, and I feel like the time that we entered tech was such a weird, strange, interesting time that we kind of romanticize and also kind of gloss over. But like, it was a time when if you were smart and curious and had access to an internet device, like you could make a great living. The tech industry is the only growth industry of my lifetime. And there's been a sense in which I think we have been living on a different planet than the rest of the post-industrialized economies.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely.
And kids these days, they come to me and they're like, what? They ask for advice on how to get into tech. And I'm just like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what to tell you. And in general, I do feel like people should try to get advice from people who were in their shoes 5 years ago, not 20 years ago. But yeah, I have no idea. And to some extent, this is a good thing, right? It's the professionalization of when we got into tech, it was a toy. Now it runs nuclear power plants. So it makes sense that there's a higher bar to entry. Anyway, yeah, I was homeschooled. I grew up on a sort of fundamentalist compound in rural Illinois, northern Idaho, the scary parts where all the white supremacists went during the Clinton administration. And we grew all of our own food. I would wake up at 5 a.m. to weed endless rows of garlic fields. And to this day, like part of me, I understand work-life balance with my head, but part of me doesn't believe that it's really work if I don't have dirt under my fingernails. Like it just feels like it could be a dream and it could just all go away and I'm going to be back to subsistence farming,
Well, and, if you're a startup founder, speaking from my experience, and you're much further into it than I am, you certainly have to get some dirt under your fingers, for sure.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, there's talk about rules that are glamorized and are really not very glamorous. Oh man. Yeah. No,
Sorry, keep
yeah,
going.
taking the trash out, that's for sure. Yeah, no, so I was the oldest and I'm the oldest of six, and I left home after the twins were born because I just couldn't take it anymore. I was just like, I've done all the parenting I will ever do. I have pulled all the weeds I will ever pull. I have washed all the dishes I will ever wash. I'm out of here. Fortunately or unfortunately, the most rebellious thing I could think of to do was go to college. So I got a piano scholarship when I was 15, and I just left. And that was right when, I think the college campus was getting wired for Ethernet the year I showed up.
And you went to college where? In
Oh,
Idaho
Idaho,
or yeah,
Moscow,
okay.
Northern
Yeah,
Idaho,
right.
Moscow. Yes, Moscow, Idaho. It's like the Berkeley of Idaho.
Yeah,
They actually
yeah.
have a really good CS department, and they have the Lionel Hampton School of Music. There is maybe one black band in all of Idaho, but somehow he founded a music conservatory that is quite good. No, I went for piano, and I had serious ADHD, and I was also working my way through college. I had 3 or 4 jobs, and I developed this theory that I should be able to just stay awake Monday through Friday and sleep on the weekends, just go from job to job, and mind over matter. Self-medicating through lack of sleep, by the way, is something that I did all the way up until 2020, and not doing that, having actual medication, has changed my life. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's so many details of the early days of Honeycomb that are pretty fuzzy in my recollection because I was literally sleeping every 2 to 4 days. But I'm pretty sure I picked a fight with you on the internet and we were like not friends for a while.
Most likely. I mean,
Yeah,
but that was a long time ago,
yeah.
and who knows? Yeah.
Who knows? But like that, this has been my self-medication is picking fights. Gives you all this dopamine, right? All this juice and energy, and then I realized that I would struggle to focus, and I sort of hacked my way around to, oh, but I can force myself to focus on things that I have no interest in if I've been awake for over 24 hours.
That just does not sound healthy. I
Oh
don't
no,
know.
it's
I mean,
terrible.
yeah, I'm very hardcore about sleep. If I don't sleep well, it's bad news. It's like hard for me to imagine actually not sleeping for that long.
It's physically painful.
Yeah.
I've been pulling some all-nighters recently, and I'm just like, I used to walk around like this all the time. It hurts. How did I get anything done? I genuinely don't know.
So let's go back to when you were at college, and I mean, obviously you were there for piano. Again, you have a great childhood story. How did you get into tech? Like, how did that happen?
I had a crush on a boy, and I followed him into the computer lab. And this is another detail that gets is both revealing and a little embarrassing. I was like, "Oh, there are no women here. Great, this is where I belong." I just decided I was a straight white dude, and just gonna make it happen. Much like I was just gonna decide not to sleep and just make it happen. Uh, but I think that subconsciously, I also saw that people who graduated with music degrees were still kicking around the music department in their 30s and 40s, working at Subway, and then, picking up odd jobs as teachers and
Yeah, for
accompanists. And
sure.
I was just
Yeah.
like, no. Like, I grew up dirt poor. I do not want to go on being poor. And this whole computer thing seems like it has legs. And I've always loved words. Like, my path into tech probably never would have happened if it wasn't for the Unix command line, but I just loved, I could sit there, I could stay there all night in the computer lab just hitting tab tab and trying all the commands. It was just fascinating, to like chain them together, and they were so descriptive and evocative and rich and powerful. And so I got a job, I think it was like jockeying backup tapes or something, or doing web server maintenance for the mass stat department. And then the next year, they gave me root for the whole university, something which I am sure they no longer do with undergrads. And then I got a job in town, and And pretty soon after that, I actually moved to San Francisco. And partly it was just because it was really hard to try and work my way through school. Like it was even that. And this is another place where I just reflect with horror on how lucky I got, because if I had left even 5 years later, it wouldn't have been possible for me to work my way through school on minimum wage jobs. Like that door was open very briefly.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
it slammed shut.
even for public university now, I mean, the costs
Yeah.
have gone up so much.
My baby sister, Claire, when I was working at Facebook, Claire decided to go to college, and she called me up in tears asking if I could help, if I could give her a loan, because one of the interesting bits of color about my family is that my father, he revoked my mom and his social security numbers. He doesn't believe that the income tax is constitutional. Basically, part of the patriot movement, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And he's been fighting with the IRS ever since. So, like, Claire didn't have a social security number. She didn't have any record of her parents' income. She was just like, I don't have any options. And she couldn't. She literally couldn't. She's a very hard worker. She couldn't work her way through school. And so, yeah, that is a crack. Anyway. Yeah,
I was going to say, I actually heard a story on NPR. We're getting way off topic here, but I think it's really interesting. I heard a story on NPR not that long ago, actually, about someone who is in their 30s that didn't have a social security number, and just the way that the laws are make it like that person does not even exist. It's like to go and get the number after the fact is almost impossible, actually.
Yeah.
So yes, I can imagine that's a very difficult situation.
But I loved computers, and it was very clear. Like, I was making, when I was 19, I think is when I left for San Francisco. And my first year in the Bay Area, I made more than my father had made in 3 or 4 years of work.
Yeah,
you know?
I bet. Yeah.
So, yeah, there was no, and I did go back and try to finish my degree once, and pro tip, you can't actually live in San Francisco for a year and then go back to rural Idaho and try to finish college. Like, it just doesn't actually work if you're a teenager.
Okay, so you wound up in San Francisco, and obviously you worked at a series of startups. I mean, tell us a bit about how that formed you into the engineer that you are today.
Yeah. So I was really lucky. Like, my formative working years were spent at Linden Lab, made Second Life. There was a moment in time where Second Life was on the cover of Time, and Facebook was this weird little thing that colleges were using, Yep. And it's addictive, and it's fun, and it's a roller coaster, and it's exciting, and the people at Linden Lab were just good, just like heart and hands, just like genuine. In retrospect, I'm like, oh wow, there were a lot of women and trans people there, and it was just like it was in the water. And I think a lot of women have not had that experience in tech, and so try to keep that in mind. But it was wonderful. And then I left to go do another startup to do mobile stuff. And that was kind of my, oh wow, not all jobs in tech are great. I never really connected with my coworkers. I stayed for a year and a day. What I learned, and that was like, it was buzzy, it was mobile, it was, right down in Palo Alto off the famous, whatever street it is. And I stayed for a year and a day because I thought I owed them that. And then I was like, well, now I know what I want. I want something that is in San Francisco with people who feel like, they're more my people. So I went and got that. And it was terrible in exactly opposite ways. Like, the technology was old. They were using Perl. They were like doing things by hand. It was like, and they thought I was great. And I was just like, this is actually the one time in my life that I've considered leaving tech because I'm just so bored. So I stayed again for a year and a day because I thought that I owed them that. Kids, if you're listening to this, you don't owe your employer a year of your life. If you hate it, leave.
I was about to ask you, actually, because, you alluded to this, but I think maybe less now, because I think the nature of work has changed, especially in the last 5 or 6 years between employers and employees. But when you and I were coming up, there was always this sentiment of work is your family. Everyone's a family. And it's like, I'm going to be honest, I think that's total bullshit. But I don't know. It's like how has your feeling on that evolved? And obviously, you're an employer now. You employ many people. It's like how do you think about this exactly?
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic. I feel like we could talk for an hour about
We
this
could
topic
for
alone.
sure. Yep.
You know, the neural pathways that we lay down for family are the first and the deepest. They're grooves. And the human brain is a fairly efficient organ. It reuses those pathways, you know? I went through a stage of, work as family. I went through a stage of anyone who says work as family is like, that is terrible. You're a bad person and you should feel bad. And now I feel like at a good job, it does kind of feel like family, but you don't say that. You don't place that expectation on someone, and you especially don't do it from the top down. Because that guilts people, it pressures them into like, because it's not appropriate to ask people to commit and sacrifice for work the way you sometimes sacrifice for family. But it doesn't mean that we don't sacrifice for work, right? It's just that like the nature of the professional relationship is I give you money, you give me output, and that's like the basis of it, right? And you
Yeah.
can't forget that. But it doesn't mean you aren't friends with these people. It doesn't mean you don't think of them fondly or get wrapped up
Sure.
in their successes and their failures and their longings and the things that they love, and their successes feel like your successes, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think it's dishonest to pretend that that doesn't happen. It should happen. But especially when you're the employer, it is very incumbent upon you to be clear about what you're asking for from people and not exceed what's appropriate, I guess. Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
mean, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. I think you and I feel very similarly about this, which is that, I mean, I think working environments should be respectful, and I think people can be friends and all of those things. But I think we're naive if we don't recognize that there's an exchange happening here. There's
Yeah,
a money exchange in exchange for output, and it is a transactional exchange. And if the exchange is not favorable for both parties, it's not like your family and it's going to save you from that. It doesn't make sense. But I think that when you and I were younger, people were, in my opinion, many were delusional about it in the
yeah,
sense that you should sacrifice because we're family, even though the transactional balance is like way off, if that makes sense.
totally. And when I look back on Linden Lab, I reflect that I remember a specific moment in time after I'd been there for like 3.5 years. We were really proud of the fact that we couldn't remember anyone ever leaving. No one had been let go. No one had quit. And I look back down, I'm like, that was not good.
Weird. Weird.
That was not good. It was not good for the people who were there. It was not good. Like there was no, we had this whole
Right.
kick about like we don't need managers. Like some things just like keep coming back like a bad sweater. But like everyone chooses their work, and it meant that it was really frustrating for people who were trying to get things done and had to convince every single person that it was worth doing.
Yeah.
Exhausting, lack of direction, lack of focus, all this stuff. And when I look back on my time at Facebook, I think it's been long enough I can talk about this now. I was really proud of keeping my big, fractious, brilliant team together. But I spent probably 75% of my energy on one particular person. And I felt really proud as a manager of my ability to keep that team on track and intact and all this stuff. And I look back now and I'm like, what else could I have done with that very large slice of my energy? And I look back at the lessons that that person didn't learn and had to learn later in life, and it was much harder then,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess you have written a lot, obviously, about management. I mean, you're clearly very passionate about that, and we can talk about that more. But also, you're obviously also known as someone in the observability space, the reliability space. So I guess just like talk a little bit about where in your early career did you start caring about that aspect of systems? I mean, I assume you were operating systems early on as when you were at Linden Labs, and then you did parse and Facebook. But like, I guess talk a bit, like you have these two paths. You have the
Yeah.
manager path, which is very interesting. You have the engineer path. So tell us a little bit about how, like, where your interest came from, just in, in general systems reliability, how you got started with observability and all of those things.
I tried being a software engineer. That was my title when I was 18 or 19. And I could not focus on it. Like I'm just like, oh my God, you mean I know what I'm supposed to be working on, not just today and this week, but next week, the whole month, the month after? Like I couldn't. And so I went towards operational stuff where there are always lots of fires, and I feel like I've always been at my best when everything is fucked. Everyone is freaking out and I just get dead calm. I'm just like, this is fine. It's fine. We'll get through this. This is what we're going to do. Boom, boom, boom. I think that this is not an uncommon experience. The neurodiversity angle is what pushed many of us towards SRE. But it is also a little bit ironic because I have always hated monitoring and I've always hated graphs. I don't think visually very well at all. My friend Ben Hartshorn, I worked with him at Linden, I worked with him at Parse, and he was our first employee at Honeycomb, and I used to joke that as soon as it was time to like build graphs, I'd bring Ben in because I don't like dealing with them. I don't like them. So it's always been rage. Similarly with, and this is something that I sometimes reflect on and think that it's not my favorite thing about myself. I don't know what it would be like to be like, goodness, this new programming language or AI thing seems very interesting. Let's go play with it for a day. That is not how my brain works. I am so driven by this must be done. This is existential. Whatever it is, I'll go do it and I will have a great time. But it is driven, and there might be a link there to ADHD. There might be a link to a very hard Scrabble upbringing. I don't know. But
I don't know. I mean, I honestly think what you're describing is a shared trait among many successful people in our industry who I would say are impact driven and not like process driven, if that makes sense, right? It's like, because I actually feel the same way about myself. I mean, yes, I have opinions like everyone else about technologies and programming languages, but honestly, I don't give a shit. It's for me, I care about the end results. That's all I care about. I care about the customer impact. And it sounds like that's what you're saying if I'm hearing it correctly.
Yeah, totally. And same for management, every time I went into management, I did it just like, well, somebody's got to do this, somebody's got to do it right. And I don't trust anybody else, and so I went and I did it. Starting a company, though, it was so, I have never been one of those kids who was like, I'm going to start a company someday, or I want to be a founder. If anything, I really kind of despise people who feel like they're too good to work for someone else. It's just not a character trait that I like. And I think there's a lot of, I think I blame YC for a lot of the sort of distorted expectations and sort of almost work upbringing of many smart, talented young kids who are told to drop out of school and start a company, or 22-year-olds who are like, what do you know about the world? And the cynic in me thinks that the reason YC cultivates this is because they're so young and impressionable and they'll do whatever their mentors tell them to do. They're not. So I don't know, but I don't like it. And then usually most companies fail. All companies fail eventually. And then you've got this 22-year-old who's now 28, 29 and has no skills and thinks they're too good to work for someone else. It's not good.
So I mean, so we did start to talk about you starting a company. I mean, you just talked about how you hate graphs. There's some irony that you started a company, and again, we'll get into the AI component and how that's changed everything. But at least when you started Honeycomb, you started a company to build graphs, like effectively. And like, how did a person that hates graphs start a company about graphing?
It's just so bad. It was just so bad. Everything. So first of all, I had the opportunity to start a company. When I was leaving Facebook, I have a work history of startups. nobody really knows or cares, and nobody knew who I was. And I was on Twitter a little bit, and then our startup got acquired by Facebook. And when I came out of Facebook, for the first time, and I assumed the last time in my life, I had the opportunity to start a company. And there was like a seed stage. It was like, would you like $1 million or $2 million? And I'm like, I accept on behalf of all women and queers and dropouts everywhere. Yes, I mean, absolutely.
Yes,
I'll try this.
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, well, we're definitely going to fail, but it's a fun way. I feel burned out. This feels like a great way to spend a year, right? In the corner writing code.
That is the best quote that I've ever heard. It's a start a company to get out of burnout.
I know. It's
sorry, I'm gonna keep laughing about that the entire time.
You are entitled to your laughter. Yeah, it is very funny. But also when we were thinking about what to do, we had this experience at Facebook. Parse was a little Ruby on Rails it was a platform for mobile, basically Heroku for mobile. And so we were having the problems that characterize pre-AI, just like microservices and complexity, and it's all, we were having those like a couple years before everyone else really got hit with them. And the problem of, you don't know which app is going to hit the top 10 in iTunes. You can't talk to the developers who are shipping these apps. You just have to understand the code on its merits. I mean, that's something we're all dealing with now with AI, right? You don't get to access the person who wrote the code and ask them what their intent was. You just have to figure out how to make it work. And that was just it. With the tools we had, it was impossible, And when we were at Facebook, we started trying some of their tools, and the experience of using Scuba and applying Scuba to these problems was mind-blowing. Like, we could blow a day just visually scanning logs.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, for people that don't know, could you just in like 60 seconds tell people what Scuba is or
Scuba is the grandmother of Honeycomb. It is pretty much every observability, quote unquote, observability tool out there is descended from infrastructure tools. Metrics, logs, and traces, 3 pillars of observability. I hate that phrase so much. It makes sense for infrastructure because in infrastructure, you're trying to operate a lot of code that you didn't write and you can't change. You just have to take whatever comes out and stash it someplace cheap. There's some insight in there, but it's not a lot, but you just have to put it someplace, So you put your metrics over there in time series database, you put your logs over there, you put your traces over there, you put your errors over there and your exceptions over there, you put everything in a different place. Scuba is much more like a BI tool. It's like a hybrid BI tool. And so it has high cardinality, it has high dimensionality, you can have as many attributes as you want, you can slice and dice, and you can zoom into individual requests, you can zoom out to the whole world. And when we started feeding some of the same data sets into Scuba, all of a sudden we could go, oh, it is, the requests from that app ID that, they're only sending 10 requests per second, but every single one of them is timing out at 30 seconds and it's saturating the lock percentage on that. You could just immediately see what was happening instead of having to know what was happening before you could find it. So yeah, I was just like, wow, I cannot imagine going back to a world where where I don't have this. So we decided to build it.
Yeah. And I think the industry thanks you for that. So,
I don't know, Matt. I don't know. I never would have predicted that the 3 beautiful pillars would still be everyone's entry point at this day and age.
Yeah. I mean, we could honestly, you and I could talk for hours and hours and hours, and we could spend a whole hour talking about that too. And I would like to, but I'd honestly rather talk about some of the AI stuff. But just like super quickly, I think it's interesting because I think you're hitting on a point where in our industry in general, it is hard to move people. I mean, it's like you and I operate in, maybe like the high tech vanguard and we work with tech forward companies, but you look at the long tail of how people do things. I mean, there's still mainframes out there, right? And it's people are set in their ways. And at least, I from the Bitdrift side of things, we're firmly a log forward company with high cardinality and all of those things. So I completely believe in everything that you're saying. But it's so complicated at the intersection of legacy technology and cost and all this other stuff. Anyway, sorry.
Yes, but I just feel like. So if I was to give my 60-second summary of why we are where we are, it is because software engineers have historically infrastructure teams have given the software engineers the tools and been like, here, this is what you get. You don't get to have opinions about this, right? And infrastructure teams deeply need their 3 pillars because they can't merge them because they don't control the software, And software engineering teams aren't used to treating telemetry like a product decision, but it is. It is a product decision because that the feedback loop of creating value, it is you build something, you look at it, you understand it, and then you act again based on what you see. And there's so much inefficiency in the current state where you've got 2 different feedback loops. You've got the build, test, merge, and production plays no part in it, right? Build, test, merge, build, test, build, test, build, test, merge, right? And on the other side, you've got the operational feedback loops. And these 2 feedback loops will endure for as long as software does. And it's not about who writes software and who operates it. It is about the tension between change and stability, right? But software engineers don't even know what changes they're introducing, right?
Sure.
And the threshold for operational action is high and has to be. So we just don't even understand most of the changes that we pump out there, right? And because the operational feedback loop gets kicked off whenever someone complains loudly enough or an error emits that threatens the entire stability of the system. So my hope is that, to segue, AI kind of clears the playing field a bit and reminds us of these first principles.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that is a perfect segue. I mean, and in some ways, maybe it resets things. In other ways, I think it just amplifies all of the problems that you just said, right? Which is now, I mean, as last I looked, I think GitHub is going down basically every day now, right? I mean, and they're going down, again, I don't know all the internal details, but I presume it's because we're just we, as in us and the machines, are outputting more code and running more GitHub actions and doing all these things. So the rate of code that we're producing is growing exponential, and we can have a whole conversation about the quality of that code. But this is where I would turn it back to you, and this is what I wanted to talk about a bit, is I feel like AI and how we produce code and how we observe it, I mean, everything is fundamentally changing right now. Yeah. So I wanted to pick your brain, I guess, on a couple of different things, and you can talk about whichever part you want. I guess I'd love to hear from you as an engineering leader. How is Honeycomb using AI internally, right? It's like, how are you internally seeing this play out, and how are you observing your own system? So kind of like through learned experience. And then from an industry perspective, I don't know, like what is happening right now, and how do you think things are changing?
Oh, it's such a great question. And, I've been, for so much of the last year, in retrospect, if I had a little Hermione Granger time machine, I would not have chosen to write a book last year. It just ended up taking me offline at some really crucial moments. However, it's done. It'll be out.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I feel like we've got like 6 hours worth of topics here. Yes. And anyway, but so I kind of emerged from my book writing hole in February and went, oh my God, I went into this hole in November and everything is so different. And I started by just doing sort of an internal tour, just having conversations with engineers. And then I'd sort of write the notes, stew over it, and then post it internally, and we'd talk about it. And Christine and I don't know if did you read the Intercom 2X memo back last summer? Where I have long looked up to the Intercom engineering team. I feel like Dara, the CTO, is just a beautiful writer. I think they're a few years ago, they said shipping is your company's heartbeat, and I love that. It should happen automatically, almost without thinking. It should be weird if it stops, right? They've consistently been like 6 to 9 months ahead of us, as an engineering org. And they issued a challenge to their entire company to, with the tools we already have, it seems like we should be able to 2x our productivity. So let's try. They said it in public, drew a line in the sand. Brave. And Christine and I stewed over that. And we'd been kind of pushing, suggesting, trying to use AI ourselves. And what I am, just as a personality trait, deeply anti-mandate. As soon as somebody mandates that I do anything, it's the last thing I want to do. So I don't like inflicting that on others. But we realized that we kind of had to, because that's how you resource things. That's how you tell people, no, this is important enough. We need managers to make time for this. We acknowledge that productivity will go down in order to go up later. Right?
Sure.
So we issued a mandate. We were like, we think this is reasonable. We think Intercom has a great track record. We'd like to do this too, And it did the job it needed to do. I think it pushed us all to get out of our comfort zone, to really dive in the deep end. One of the things we told the folks is, and there's a lot of ops DNA in Honeycomb. A lot of the cranky, cynic, poking holes in, that sucks, we don't like that. And this is one of my personality traits, so like I am saying this about them, and it's very true of me. But what we said was, you don't have to uncritically love AI. You're allowed to hate it, but you need to hate from a place of expertise, right? You can't just be like, I don't want to do that because all of these very valid things that are problems. You need to be an expert in order to be like, this is why I choose not to do X, Y, Z. And so when I came out of my book tour and I was doing a little internal tour, it was really interesting. So Intercom recently published a follow-up, and they showed all these beautiful stats. They're like, we said we do this in a year. It's been 9 months and we've already 3X'd. And I'm like, you guys are amazing. We don't have quite as many resources as you. And I wish I could write a blog post. I don't think we quite have.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but let me ask the obvious question, because it's probably going to come up anyways. 3x what? Right? Yeah. It's like, what does that mean? Like tokens spent?
Damn it, Matt, you sound just like all of my engineers.
No. Look. I'm coming at this from the perspective of one of the people where I haven't written a line of code myself in about 6 months now. Like I'm all in on the tools. But as in everything else in our industry, we like to make up a lot of useless metrics. So again, I'm asking you as a manager of a large team, like how are you thinking about this?
Yeah. I understand why fucking Gary Tanner's like, well, I committed 30,000 lines of code. And like, I thought Brian Cantrell's essay, Your Intellectual Fly is So Open or something like that, was just like, perfect. The thing is that the Intercom post showed that the metrics that they're looking at, and we are looking at a specific basket of metrics. The answer is not don't measure things. The answer is measure more things. Measure a basket. And it's almost like the rigor that you introduce into the system by asking yourself that question consistently. What is the outcome we're trying to move here? What does productivity mean to us? Sometimes it's speed. Sometimes it's trying more experiments. Sometimes it is quality. Sometimes it is creativity. Sometimes it is, there are all these other things. And the answer is yes to all of them. Which ones matter now? And that muscle, I think, is underdeveloped in all of us.
So, I would say it's not even about AI. I think our industry is horrible about things that aren't like we like to measure everything, but not everything is easily measurable, right? So I don't know. I don't know. That's a whole separate topic. But
no, that's super true. And right now there's a blog post I'm really hoping I can find time this week to spit out, because I've gone to a few little conferences recently, and I am so over the triumphant vibe coder. We rewrote, we vibe coded the hardest, gnarliest part of our blah, blah, blah in 2 weeks and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I know engineers who work at your company. I know that's not exactly what happened. I know that's not the whole story. I know people quit because they got handed a pile of shit.
Well, or did you ship it to production? Did it work?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and that's and that gets into the second part of what I was asking you, which is, you can code all day, but if it
Yes.
doesn't work, what is it doing?
Yes. Like all of my favorite in this genre was the journalists who vibe coded a clone of the Slack app in an afternoon, and they're producing it like, oh my God, all programming jobs are at risk. And you're like, literally, that is not what you think it means. It's like the mental model of how to interact with that app. Nobody wants to wake up and find the buttons on Slack move around slightly from day to day, No, but the hard part is building an app that 1 billion people could use and that is stable, that is Anyway, I know I'm preaching.
Not to mention all the hidden stuff around compliance, security,
Yes.
auditing. I mean, it's like APIs. Just like the millions of things that But again, I actually don't want to harp that much because I agree the discourse is as stupid as you are saying it is. I'm more curious about both. You've started to talk about a little bit about your internal usage, your internal productivity, and I'm assuming you're using it to help with operations of the Honeycomb service itself. But I guess I would love to talk a bit about where are you seeing the industry going, I guess, both with the massive code that's being produced. How are you seeing your customers and where are you seeing things going in terms of using the tools to actually, because at the end of the day, we're trying to create business outcomes, right? It's like, if we're not succeeding at our business outcomes, what the fuck have we done? Nothing. And you're obviously at the epicenter of that. So I guess talk a little bit about how things are changing and how you see observability changing, in this new world.
That is a very large question and a very good one. One of the most interesting things I read recently was the CEO, Kyle Forster. He posted sort of just like this very brief little post about how, our little AI SRE agents in production, only talk to the 3 pillars like 30% of the time. 70% of the time, they, on their own, go out seeking richer sources of data. They go upstream trying to find data that hasn't been split up, right? They look for all the context to be intact. There's in the preface of the second edition of the book, I was like, I feel like this is a running joke of 2026. It's like, oh, you mean we need fast feedback loops? Oh, you mean we need context? Oh, you mean it's like we're rediscovering all these first principles. Only we can't patch over the lack of them with our intuition and stupid human tricks anymore because we're not necessarily in every loop. And that is, I think, why the 3 pillars have endured as long as they have, is because humans have always been there to go, well, I have a feeling that log line is probably that metric, and so
Yep, sure.
Close enough, right? Good enough for government work. And that's just, if our wisdom is not encoded into the system, it doesn't exist. And I choose to interpret this as something that's very exciting because I think you and I both feel very strongly about a lot of engineering best practice. It has always struck me that our, quote unquote, thought leadership has always been so much more widely read and, cared about than our product, when in my opinion, they're the same thing. Right? The product is an emanation of our engineering values. Our engineering values, we learn them from building the product and watching people use it. But the reality is, I think that without AI, they are not within reach for the median engineering team. They're barely within reach of the top 5%.
Sorry, what are you referring to?
I'm referring
what is in
to
reach?
The feedback loop of instrumenting your code
okay.
as you go,
Right.
going and looking at it after
Yes.
it ships,
Yes.
and going, what happened? And all of the sort of tools and the craft of code crossing over from development to production.
Yeah.
The idea
sorry,
that
go
like production doesn't start when it's like development doesn't end and then it goes into production. It's like that's more like the 4th trimester, right? That's when your code is actually tested for the first time. But like a vanishingly small percentage of developers that are working on anything of size or scale have the tools, because it has taken so much engineering discipline to arrive at that state.
I was going to say, I mean, setting aside that if I'm being selfish, I think this is a good business opportunity for observability companies because we are spitting out so much code that people have to figure out what's going on. But like setting that aside, I am legitimately excited, and I am one of those people that I do not think AI is going to lessen the number of engineering jobs. I think we're going to have just as many engineers doing just as many things and shipping things and debugging things and all of those things. But I am excited about this new world, and exactly what you said is that I think the AI tools, as they evolve, it's going to allow best practices to be practiced by more teams, like
Yes.
versus the elite teams that can do it
Yes.
today through their mental knowledge and those kinds of things.
Yeah, in the past it's been like you have to be such a high-performing team in order to be a high-performing team.
Right.
And if you aren't there, if your company's ever gotten into a certain state of tech debt, you never recover, right? And it's just not, it's not practical.
Yeah. I mean, without sharing internal details that you might not want to share, which is fine, I guess, like, do you feel that your product is going to have to evolve for this new world? I mean,
yeah.
it's like, are you starting to think about how you adapt the honeycomb of the last decade to
very,
what the
very much.
next decade will mean? And I guess from what you can share, like, what does that mean exactly? Like, what are you changing? What are you thinking about?
Yeah. At a high level, and actually we are doing, by the time this comes out, it'll probably be old news, but we are doing a big sort of release extravaganza in a couple of weeks. But in general, I would say this. The past has consisted of a lot of silos. You know, operations teams look at these silos, developers look at everybody's capturing another copy of production in a slightly different format, using slightly different details, and we're paying to save it, 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 times. And it is less great than this. It is worth less than the sum of its parts, because every time you fragment it, you decrease the value and the usefulness of any individual segment. And the beautiful thing about MCPs and the sort of impressionistic, output of AI is, some of our biggest MCP users internally come from sales or from marketing or from customer success, and they're just in conversation with the data all day. It's approachable. And I think that we're increasingly going to see it move to like a data lake, unified, because those relationships are actually the most valuable part of the data, right? And when you carve it up before you write it out, you can never get them back again. And so preserving those relationships and then moving the work of interpreting to, clients or, interactions or whatever, and just making it so that you don't have to be an expert in your tools to be an expert in your company.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting, both from a product perspective, but even putting on our reliability hat of operating these systems for people. I think just the rate of queries is about to go through the roof, right?
You're already
it's
seeing
like,
this.
like how do you start building your system to enable
And
that
then
in a
agents get
cost
involved. They're
effective
just
way?
like boom, 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 boom. I want to iterate so fast. And I feel like those of us who have invested in speed, like it blows my mind that there are people out there who wait minutes for a query to return. But that's still like the state of the art in most of the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're basically at time, even though I think that we can talk for hours and hours and hours. I guess, do you have any last words that you would like to leave us with, either in the AI space or anything else? Like, how are your feelings about the industry over the next few years?
I feel like there's a lot of anxiety in the air right now. So people are just anxious. And part of this is the sort of information diet we were just talking about. There's a lot of money to be made by making people feel anxious.
Absolutely.
And I felt a lot of anxiety too when I sort of came out of my book hole. I'm just like, oh my God, is everything I know obsolete? The answer is that it's not. First principles are more needed than ever, but the only way to soothe that anxiety is to jump in the deep end, is to find your feet. You can't inherit someone else's understanding. There's an intuition, a way of using things. And right now is the easiest it will ever be. Right now, we're all effectively beginners, right? A year or two from now, that will not be true, right? So if you're not learning what you need to learn at your current job, learn it on the side and look for a new job, because you do not want to be starting this stuff 2 years from now.
Those are great words and great advice, which I would also give people. Anyway, we're probably gonna have to do a follow-up because I think there are many topics
Anytime,
that
Matt.
we could talk about at much greater depth. So thank you so much. So that's a wrap for this episode of Beyond the Noise, Signals, Stories, and Spicy Takes. Huge thanks to Charity for joining and sharing her story. You can find this episode and all past ones on the BitShift YouTube channel. So if you had fun, drop us a review, tell your friends, or yell your favorite hot take into the void, and just make sure to tag us. I'm Matt Klein, and I will see you next time. Thank you.